Imagine falling asleep for 14 years, only to wake up and find the world has moved on, except for one place, and that place is Darwin. That's exactly what the property market here feels like, frozen in time, overlooked and misunderstood. But why? What's holding it back? Is it about to boom? In this sesh, we're peeling back the layers with Kirsty, an expert local property manager who spent nearly 2 decades walking Darwin streets, studying the market, and uncovering its secrets. It's time to go boots on the ground and discover the untold truth about Darwin. Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Miles, and together with Joe Tucker, we've created Australia's largest property Facebook community with over 78,000 property investors. Each week we interview top property experts and you get to sit along to be part of that. Buckle up, this is a story you won't want to miss with Kirsty from the Leasing Lane and special guest co-host from Pizza and Property, Todd Sloan. Let's jump in. And we are live on On's Property Investor. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. Now, welcome back, everyone. And tonight we're going to be talking about Darwin, which is where tropics may meet opportunity. And we're diving into the real estate scene with an expert who's spent 12 years watching it evolve. And she'll reveal the suburbs thriving with potential, the ones to reconsider, and why understanding Darwin's unique vibe is smart investing. So strap in, let's uncover the hotspots, the not spots, and the hidden gems of this dynamic city. So with that intro, Kirsty, how you going today?
Good, I'm doing well.
That's awesome. It must be. I wonder what's it like. It's absolutely humid as anything down here in the south coast of New South Wales. So I can imagine. Is it dry, wet season or dry up in Darwin?
Yeah, we're going into our wet season at the moment, so it's only just starting, but that's kind of the worst time to be. We call it the build-up, so that means it's really, really hot, and we only get the relief when it rains.
There you go.
And the rain is warm.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine because it's quite close to the equator. So, Todd, the Pizza and Property, how you going, man? You've been busy, I hear.
Good, mate. Always keeping busy, and absolutely lovely to see you, Kirsty.
Yeah. And thanks for filling in for Joe. So heads up, Joe's going to be away for a couple of weeks, but we're going to have lots of fun. So we're going to be able to do the stuff that we can't do when Joe's away. So on the agenda for tonight, we're going to be giving you an around the sort of ground of, well, what's unique about Darwin, what you need to be keeping in mind for a property management and just in general as well, because there's a couple of things you need to know about Darwin. And then there's as well the suburbs that we'll do an actual map. So we'll do an over the shoulder look at what's going, the different burbs of Darwin. And then we'll start to unpack the suburbs that are getting a lot of interest at the moment. So it's going to be a fun-filled session. So drop your suburbs in the comments as well that you want Kirsty to. I mean, there's not hundreds. I have a couple. So it's going to be. But for the person standing in front of us today, so Kirsty, you are the devoted owner and operator of the Leasing Lane, embarked on that journey, as I said, in 2012, and it must have sort of changed a little bit over those years, or maybe it hasn't. But driven by you're a property investor as well. So you do the full gamut. You have the knowledge and the experience. And you are exceptional sort of with your accomplishments. You've got the prestigious 2021 Real Estate Northern Territory Operational Leadership Award. And you were the BDM of the year 2023, Operational Leadership 2023 as well, and the runner-up Public Choice of 2024, Community Service Agent of 2024. So you must have brought a wheelbarrow to your awards nights.
How good's that intro?
Yeah.
Could have. Yeah, so
I can't complain with that. So thank you.
No, it's good to have you. So, with the first question I suppose I want to ask is what are you sort of seeing on the ground up there in Darwin? There's been a heck of a lot of interest, but so what's the groundswell of? Is there a groundswell of opportunity, or is it just slowly ticking along? What's your perception of what's happening?
At the moment, we are getting a lot of investor. Inquiries, a lot of movement, whereas it was a little, I wouldn't say stagnant before, but probably not as popular as it is right now. And that's kind of new to us. We haven't had that sort of interest, especially from interstate, in quite some time. So it's busy, really busy. A lot of properties aren't even making it to the market. They're selling before.
That's when you say a lot of properties, you mean like half a lot, like 10% a lot? What's a lot?
I don't know about the percentage, but I do know a lot of people that are, I guess, pushing their listings to their existing client database before putting them online, and that way getting a quicker result. So like it's I guess it's probably advantageous to reach out to larger agencies or even the smaller ones and just ask to go on their books for pre-market listings, and you generally they'll flick you a message if they get something that aligns with what you like. That way, obviously, that's cheaper for the seller as well, because they have no marketing and advertising vacancy. It's a lot faster. So yeah, we do have a lot of that. People will keep a database.
I was just going to say, are you finding that like vendors need a bit of an education around that? Because like off market's pretty common in markets where there's like a lot of investor activity. But if you're saying that there's not been as many investors in Darwin for a while now, is it a bit like, what do you mean off market? Is there a bit of a barrier that needs to be overcome, or not really?
No, I don't think so. I think because it's relatively new, we've kind of had a lot of activity for the last probably 3 months. So everyone now is making the decision to potentially not advertise because there are these existing opportunities that have come up. So it hasn't always, I guess, been a thing. People have always done off market, of course, to their existing database, but they're moving them a lot quicker now.
Gotcha. So 3 months.
Yeah.
So this is like super fresh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, yes, I've been noticing it for the last few months.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's and so to give let's peel back the layers of the. I love the question as well, Todd. Like it's really kind of pertinent for those to understand what the sort of atmosphere is in Darwin, because people may not know agents selling. They may not sort of be as familiar, and maybe they are, but it's good to kind of get that lay of the land and set the scene. So I want to know though, what are you sort of seeing change, and what do you sort of see potentially not potentially happening, but what do you feel the drivers? Like you had we were speaking before the session about Impex and sort of saw that happening in sort of the mid 2000s, and that drove a lot of interest and a lot of money towards Darwin, which saw it become close to the highest real estate sort of market, the most expensive market in Australia, and then it just sort of
huge.
has tracked sideways for close to 10 to 14 years. So what do you sort of see are those key drivers, and is it potentially different from last time if this does take off again? Big question, I know.
To be honest, a lot of the feedback has just been because we are the most affordable at the moment, or close to the most affordable. That's probably been the biggest, when I've been speaking to people, that's their key factor, is the price point.
One of the things I actually saw just recently, and apparently Darwin, this was quite interesting, was one of the only places in the country where wage growth was actually outpacing price growth for property. So as far as the affordability piece is concerned, like it's not just affordable for investors, but it sounds like it's actually affordable, like more affordable to live there than anywhere else as well.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, yes, it's been very there's a lot of opportunity in Darwin. So in terms of working and living, it's kind of, in my opinion, like endless. You can kind of, the sky's your limit as long as you're willing to work hard. There's a lot of opportunity.
That's it's amazing to sort of hear that perspective, and it sort of hits on one of the reasons why there's that interest. I was sort of looking at the numbers, and I'll see if I bring this up today, just on the if you look at what's happening in Darwin in the last sort of little bits, just to give a perspective. So I think the thing that's starting to drive a lot of interest, particularly among sort of first home buyers, is that the Fresh Start New Homes program, which can give people anywhere between 10 to 50K. First home buyers and existing homeowners as well. So are you seeing a lot of, I know you're in the property management, but are you sort of starting to see that's for homeowners, but is that the talk of the town at the moment?
Yeah, a lot of people toward at the end of our recent election, a lot of people were holding out because they were waiting for these grants. So it has, I guess, given it a bit of traction. People were, I mean, the grants are awesome. So why would you not take advantage of that?
Yeah. And the other thing that is really been on everybody's lips is whilst the price growth over the last 12 months has only been 2%, whereas the rest of a lot of the other capital cities, bar your Melbourne and maybe Sydney as well, and Tassie, your Perths, your Adelaides, and your Brisbane are still sort of chugging along, some at rapid growth. But the thing that is really getting people quite interested is the median house rents have increased in the last quarter by close to 2%, to $646 a week, which when you can pick up a property for somewhere between that sort of 4 to 600,000, I mean, to me, with a gross yield of around that sort of the mid to high sixes, and they've increased by close to 15% over the year, 14.9. So to me, that sort of starts to really get the investors interested. And I suppose then, what's are you hearing a lot from your friends and I don't know if you have heaps of friends and family up, and because you're originally from a different part of Australia, but what
I thought you were going to say, I don't know if you have friends then.
No, I realized I was like, hang on, Jeff, you're about to say something. No, but you're extremely busy with a lot of things on your life. But so what is are people who live in Darwin, they sort of saying, look, rents have just absolutely started to skyrocket. I'm sick of this. I'm going to start buying. Like, just as an anecdotal, what you're hearing.
Yeah, we have definitely had people that way inclined. So as a property manager for the last few years, it's been really easy to tenant a property. We've had it pretty good. So we haven't, we were having sometimes, 12 applications on a property. It was getting wild. So it was like people thought, stuff that, I'm going to buy it instead. So we did definitely have a lot of that happening. And that was purely because our supply was lower then, so we could charge more. And we obviously had the selection, whereas now it's still going well, but it's not as good, I guess. Now we're getting around, the 6 applications rather than the 12. So I still can't complain.
Yeah, that's still quite a strong
Makes it easier.
market. Yeah, it does. And I mean, there's sales. I'm just looking at the sales numbers. Then we'll start to get into the suburbs and around the grounds, which is I'm sure what a lot of. So if you have questions about specific suburbs you're interested in, drop those, and we'll get to as many as we can. But the number of houses sold in the last quarter, I believe it is, increased by 30%. So, and that's I think up to sort of 375. So you're starting to see, yes, maybe there may be necessarily more supply, but the demand is sort of starting to really tick up, which there'll be a lag in that sort of data. So I'm not saying there's everything go Darwin, but I'm just saying that this is why I wanted to have this section to really sort of unpack, is it potentially something like a next Townsville? I'm not suggesting you to ask that, but it's just, these are the kind of information we want to present. What are your thoughts anyway, Todd? What are you hearing and seeing?
Well, what I was actually just really curious of, and to kind of somewhat build on what you're saying there, Jeff, but is to find out what the tipping point is for rents, because I know in Adelaide right now, if you're getting rents around that kind of $600 a week mark, and I think from memory around like sort of Greater Sydney, it's more around that kind of $850 a week mark. It's like the competition below that figure is fierce. The competition above that figure changes pretty rapidly. What's that sort of tipping point for Darwin?
In terms of how much inquiry we're getting, like a standard home?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably up to like 750, we are seeing good traction. Anything over that kind of gets a bit more scarce. But I did just lease a property a couple of days ago. It was online for 8 days, and I got $980 for that one. So like there is still like a decent demand for it. With everything, if the home is presented well and well maintained, and it's obviously worth that value, you will still find a tenant. You may not just, for example, they had 2 applications versus other properties may have 6 or 7. So you do limit your pool the higher you go.
Yeah. You were telling me the other day there's a property of, I think, a 5-bedder, and yes, maybe this is not your atypical property, but a person picked this property up, I think was for low 6s or mid 6s in 2020?
Yeah. When was it? I think it was probably around 2019, I would think. Yeah.
And you were saying, and tell us, let's unpack that sort of, because I thought that was, and I'm not saying everybody's going to be able to get this, but they were, I think the property's now renting for $890. You said it was rented for around?
No, this is the same one. So it's $980 that they're receiving at the moment. There
you go.
Yeah. To be fair, it's a huge property. It's on a 1,700 square meter block. It's got the shed, the pool, the solar. It's got everything. So like it's worth what it's achieving. But they just fortunately got a really good deal. and it's now paying off, obviously.
Yeah, because you're saying that arguably she's and there may be sort of the valuation on the property around that sort of 900, and look, it's an outlier, it's an anecdote. I'm not saying that everybody buys a property in Darwin's going to see 50% increase in a couple of years. Like
absolutely not. Yeah.
But the thing that I wanted to sort of unpack is, and Guru has mentioned this, dollar paid is increasing because a lot of industries can't hire staff because of compliance. So this is something that I saw in my research on Darwin, is that you kind of think Darwin, you think government, you think Navy, and you think mining. But I think that's far from the truth, on which is what we're kind of talking about here. We're talking about the truth. So there's a lot of healthcare, there's a lot of education, and there's a lot of, yes, there is government. But mining, I was surprised, only made up about sort of 7 or 8%. And maybe that's directly in with Darwin, those are the numbers. But it sounds like you've got a very diverse industry up there in terms of employment. Would you sort of say that's the case?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of healthcare workers would be one of the big ones, like that I mostly see. We do get like the defence, they typically will have their own accommodation provided. Only when their accommodation is full will they go to the general, I guess, leasing. So yeah, a lot of it will come from just your regular workers. It's not necessarily, I guess, one target.
I love that Greg's saying, let's just move the important stuff. Firstly, what is your favorite pizza? That's at the end, folks. I mean, keep the comments coming. Keep your things. There is a question about BAs moving. We'll probably get to that, Brendan. We're going to call investors, but there may be a couple. But I mean, BAs are buying everywhere. There's so many proliferating in the market. So I'd be surprised if there isn't any across the country. But what I wanted to know, so let's get to, because we all want to hear about the suburbs and where the hotspots versus not spots, and we will 100% get to those. But I want to know, for those who are just landing in Darwin tomorrow, what are the key sort of property management things that people need to keep in mind if they're going to pick up a property in the next 3, 6 months or 12 months?
Yeah, so like if they're going to be a landlord.
Yeah, exactly. What are those? One of the things you mentioned was no cause evictions are still available in the Northern Territory, from my understanding.
Yes. I mean, for now, who knows? But yes, we do have that option, as long as we provide 60 days notice. So, I mean, it is obviously a bigger period sometime, but it's working out quite well. Your property manager would ask you about 90 days in advance. So you probably have to make a quick decision on that. So yeah, it would be probably the notice to vacate. Another big one for us is our breach notices. So if someone is in rental arrears, we do have to wait until the 15th day before we can breach them. And that gives them obviously time to remedy the breach, and failure to do that, we'd go to NTCAT, but we do have to wait. So it's a lot longer, I think, than other states.
And are there any changes that coming in,
fun.
Kirsty, like, oh, sorry, I think I jumped over the top of you then. Are there any changes coming in that's similar to what happened in Victoria and bits of Adelaide, or not bits of Adelaide, in South Australia, with minimum rental standards now needing like R5 insulation in the ceilings, you're needing like certain kinds of water restrictors, all kinds of tests? Is it the same in the NT, or is it a bit more relaxed?
No, it's a yes and a no. It is quite relaxed, and it has been relaxed for some time, but we do have some things coming in terms of smoke alarms and RCDs, switchboards, like that kind of stuff. It's not in effect, I don't believe, yet, but we've had a lot of, I guess, talk about potential changes, but none of them are, I guess, anything I would deem as wrong. They're all quite fair.
Yep. Okay. So it's all just making a house a better place to live. Nothing that's outlandish.
Yeah, exactly. Safer, nothing crazy. But I would still say Darwin is quite relaxed to everywhere else.
Yeah, and that's because there was the PIPA survey that came out a couple of months ago that said that Darwin is although the capital growth may not be there at the moment, they were second on the list in terms of the states where people want to invest. I think the other one may have been WA right at the top. I could be wrong there, so don't quote me. But and the question was asked on the podcast, and it's been asked across various podcasts, from Nicola Powell. It's like, why is Northern Territory up there? And I think it's part of that, people are somewhat sick and tired of the rental legislation, the landlord or rental provider in Victoria, as they call them these days. But the rental provider in Victoria, just those chop and changes. And they said, well, where can I actually go and buy a property and not have onerous? But have there been any murmurings of, not at this stage from the sounds of it, from what the answer to Todd's question was?
Look, definitely there's always, I guess, subjects and talks, but in terms of actual changes, we move quite slow. So we do get plenty of notice. I've seen other states where they get not much notice and it's this is this and then too bad, but we're quite involved, especially our real estate institute is quite involved in those sort of topics, and they do give you plenty of notice if anything is changing.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you actually run like a very fair and reasonable. I'm like, this is like this makes sense. Like, why don't other states kind of run in a similar fashion? But there's probably a reason. But what I wanted to know, what other sort of things do people need to keep in mind about the Darwin sort of property market from a general perspective, or even just, I suppose, as the rental legislation? You've got your pets as probably a key one that people look at. What are those sort of things that people need to know?
Yeah. So in terms of pets, we really can't decline a pet in a residential, like a standard house. The only time that we really could do that is when there is a body corporate and their rulings are against pets. Most of our body corporates will go to a vote. So that may or may not charge a fee to the owner. I've seen them upwards to about $300 per pet application. Then probably the next biggest, or what I mean, people deem it big, I think it's normal, but our water allowance. So generally written into our contracts, it's a standard that the landlord would provide the tenant with 125 kilolitres of water per quarter. So basically we would receive the bill. If it's over that amount, we will charge the excess to the tenant. There is an occasion where you can charge the full amount, but that needs to be clearly stated in the lease. So if it's not in there, then it's down to the standard. And before you say why, that's because during our dry season, the gardens obviously are quite dry. So what we do is providing that water allowance helps maintain the property, make sure the pool is topped up, make sure the garden stays green for that period, and it stays in good condition.
Got it. Speaking of the seasonality side of things, we were talking about something quite interesting off air the other day about the seasons and when it's best to actually rent a property. And apparently this is actually something that can be quite important when it comes to leasing a property in Darwin. Are you able to open up a bit more detail around that again?
Yeah, I guess we obviously have our wet season and our dry season. So we have 6 months of both, which is good. I guess any time is okay to rent a property if it's priced for that market. But what I would personally, I guess, say is if you're owning a property in the CBD or the surrounds, like maybe the coastline or within the CBD itself, just be wary that when it is our wet season, there will be a really large influx of Airbnb properties that will come onto the market. So what they do, obviously they make a good money in the dry because that's our tourism season, and it's lucrative at that time. But between September and sort of November, December, those Airbnbs will then be coming online looking for a longer term tenant to get them through the wet season where they probably wouldn't have gotten any bookings. So they'll generally take 3 to 6 month leases during that time. So if you're trying to list your CBD or surrounds, you'll have, I'm talking like maybe 50 extra listings.
Wow. That is very valuable information.
Yeah. But definitely CBD, like it is great. And of course, in the dry season, you can rent it really well. So it's not to deter you from the CBD. It's just during those peak periods, you might be strategic about taking a 6, a 9, or an 18-month lease to make sure you're not in that period.
Yeah, it's that's the kind of information that somebody who's not in the area, not a local, would need to know, because you sort of you just think, oh yeah, you'll get a property rented from November to November, and you sort of is that a peak time and those sort of things. And this plays to your question, Todd, that you asked about the prices of units and And I'll caveat this with that Kirsty is a property manager, so she does know, I suppose, and see a lot of things. But what are your thoughts, I suppose, putting your property manager, and I want you to ask, I'll get you to ask your question as well, Todd, which is, Jen's asked, which is a better investment in Darwin, units or houses? And the answer to that is, I suppose it always depends. It's case by case. But in your view, considering your property manager lens, what do you see as the better or the more favorable investment in Darwin?
It really does depend, obviously, on the price point and how cheap you can get the unit. I mean, personally, I favour houses because they're more versatile. They tend to, in my opinion, attract a better, not a better tenancy, but a more longer term tenancy, because there'll be people that want to settle down. They might have a family. They're probably not going to move as often. People, I guess, in the units, they might be here for work, seasonal, or might upgrade to a home at some point. So both are good. I lease both quite simply, but I personally prefer houses.
And out of interest, is there anything obvious that you see on the ground then, Kirsty, that really explains the correlation between, I suppose, unit price growth and house price growth being so closely linked? Because I'm looking at a chart. I was lucky enough to spend all day with Jung today, and her and I were chatting about this, and she's given me some data. Over the past 20 years, it's literally neck and neck. Like house prices and unit prices have grown in absolute unison over the past 20 years. Nowhere else in the country has done that. Is there any light you can kind of shed on that?
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind for me is that we don't have as high volume of like units, I guess, and apartments as other places. Ours will predominantly be CBD and surrounds, coastline. You can get like duplexes, complexes, smaller ones in the suburbs and in Palmerston, but we don't have, I guess, as high a volume. And that's just my thought.
Okay, that does actually kind of make sense. So whereas somewhere like Melbourne has got like an absolute plethora of units, and that's going to obviously bring that. What's that? Sorry?
Legoland, like they just build them like build on top of each other. Even Canberra these days, like I don't know if you've ever been to, you've probably been to Canberra once or twice, Todd, but I used to go there all the time. And that geocon, they're just building hundreds and hundreds, and you just think, wow, no wonder why there's such a disparity between the prices of units and houses in a place like Canberra and Melbourne. But yeah, Darwin, it just sounds like there's limited somewhat supply of units.
Yeah, so if there's limited supply of both, they're kind of growing somewhat in unison. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's and any other, before we kind of go to, because I want to get to around the grounds and the juicy suburb of juicing of where you're seeing a lot of interest in suburbs. So any last minute sort of property management legislation people absolutely have to know if they're buying a property in Darwin?
I wouldn't say legislation based. I would just say in terms of if you're looking to achieve the best rental outcome, you should present your best and keep it well maintained. So if you're going to keep it run down, you can expect that that's the sort of tenancy you're going to attract. And I'm not saying keep it, pristine and pump money into it all the time, but having a clean, well-maintained home goes a lot further than the rundown one. A lot easier to rent as well.
I think that really that I mean, it's a great tip, particularly in Darwin, where I imagine there would be a lot of wear and tear with weather and all that sort of thing, like weathering over time. But in any location, if you're new to property investing, I think it's absolutely vital to take that on board and really we talk about buffers and emergency funds and having that. So to consider the factor into maintenance, so you're going to have to put into the property, whether it be, I don't know, a lick of paint every sort of 10, 15 years if you're going to own that long, or just general maintenance, or like houses do require and units do require money. I mean, units often get looked after by strata, but it's just that thing for the first or second timer that unfortunately hot water systems go, like things need to be replaced. So I absolutely love that you've mentioned that, Kirsty.
But even if you do go down the unit path, Jeff, it's important to understand that the maintenance still applies the same way. And if you don't have a sinking fund and that thing's not being maintained correctly from the body corporate side, you might be hit with some pretty extreme special levies as well. So, and everyone kind of shares a pretty huge cost.
Yeah, definitely. I love that somebody actually even brought that up before you mentioned it.
I think there you go. No, I think it's important to note as well that even if you maintain it really well and you get a new tenant in, I promise you they will find something to tell you about. And that's not for any other reason than they don't want to be held liable for it at the end. So a lot of my clients that are considering doing minor maintenance, I generally will say, just wait till the tenant's in there for about a week. And they may add to that, which will then save you on another call-out fee. Generally small things, of course. If there's larger things, do that before the tenancy so that you make sure that it's safe and well. But if it's, something very minor, I would generally wait and group the works for once the tenant is there and tells us, because they're living in it 24/7. We're only in there for an hour. So we're not going to notice, I guess, everything that they notice.
Can also make a big difference to the tax implication as well if it's available. If it's available for rent and then you're doing maintenance, then you can actually claim it on tax. Whereas if it's just completely vacant, not available for rent, and it's maintenance, then I feel like I have to say I'm not an accountant, but I'm pretty sure on that one.
So okay, Toddy, I got it here for you. So
excellent. There we go.
General information only. Not be taken as financial or accounting advice. So
man, you were quick to put that up. Well done.
Yeah, I know. I think about it every time. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to, before we get into the suburbs and the areas, which are going to be juicy, of course, but I've obviously loved just the insight. But I think this is one that a lot of people are asking, and I think it's important because for those considering investing in Darwin, you want to know who your demographic and the type of tenant it's going to be living in, and it's going to vary from area to area. What type of tenants are you sort of seeing? A lot of RAAF, so Royal Australian Air Force in Darwin. Is it families or military? Like what kind of tenants, typical tenant? And that's hard to answer, but do you have sort of standard tenants you see in Darwin?
Predominantly my tenants will be families. That is what I see the most of. In terms of defence, I probably only have a handful of them versus a lot of the regular, just mum and dad working. I don't get a lot of... I do get a lot of hospital workers as well, but most of my tenants will be families, or they'll be people that are here for work. I actually have quite a lot of people that will come for 6 months, leave their wife and family at home, rent, and then go back when their work is done. So generally families and the odd single person for me. Yeah.
And there's just, I feel like there's a lot of money being spent on infrastructure and billions and billions of dollars being spent at the moment as well, which is just going to be interesting to see where that lies. So it's come to that. Look, I've loved the property management sort of legislation, general things. If you could share your screen, Kirsty, and if we're going to describe it as best we can. So if you listen to the podcast, that's fine. If you're not, jump on the YouTube, that's good as well. But yeah, if you could share your screen, because we're going to do an around the grounds and sort of talk to the different segments of Darwin and what each part sort of looks at. And we're going to go out to Palmerston as well. So, and then we'll sort of unpack which areas we're getting a lot of interest in as well, just purely from, I suppose, the property management. So I'm excited to share this. So if you've got any areas you want to see, let us know.
Can you see it okay?
I can. Looks great.
Oh,
so
okay.
Take us into the segments. It's nice and zoomed. Can you, a little bit.
Wonderful. So generally, we would refer to it in 3 different sections, which would be the CBD and surrounds, which looks like in this map, it's sort of like the Darwin to Wanelli area. And then we would consider anything from Nightcliff all the way to Karama. On this map, we would consider that the northern suburbs. Mm-hmm. And then our 3rd section would be Palmerston, which is, of course, all the way over here and this entire region. So we would categorize it into those 3 areas. And I guess, do you want me to just run down who's expected in what area?
Yeah, or even just what characterizes like the CBD, like it was kind of unpacked and said that there's a lot of units in there. But if you could sort of talk to some of the more notable suburbs, and not notable for good or bad, but just ones that people know and to be kind of on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the CBD, there will be a lot of apartment complexes. Homes are a bit rare this way. I mean, not, of course, there are homes there, but they're not as popular, I guess. We'll have a lot of apartments, complex buildings around this area. And generally from there, we'll attract people who are working in the city, who enjoy sort of the nightlife around town. There's a lot of restaurants and I guess the foreshore, and we've got a waterfront which is really lovely. So that's more, I guess, of an entertainers area, people that are probably looking for that kind of outgoing lifestyle. But of course, we do get a lot of people that are working in the city that want to be in the city. It's easy to navigate. So that's typically what we would rent to in the city and surrounds. Then if you flick over to the northern suburbs, Nightcliff is quite popular. People really like the coastline, the lifestyle that it provides. There's a lot of night markets and I guess events in Nightcliff. So Nightcliff, Rapid Creek, there's a mixture of homes and I guess complexes, small complexes there. And the blocks are quite big, so it is good. It's a good lifestyle. If we're looking
Kirsty,
at, I guess, northern suburbs
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is there a couple of areas that you'd know around Australia that could be like comparable for these? So anyone that lives maybe in Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne, Perth, like that can go, oh, okay, cool. It's kind of like that one.
I love that question, Todd. Debbie.
Oh my gosh. I mean, if I'm honest, Darwin is just not comparable to anywhere. We're in our own lane. Yeah. I would say, I mean, I'm from Perth, so I can only really, I guess, compare it to that.
Okay.
I would think Nightcliff.
Nothing else like it in Perth?
I mean, not really. Darwin's one of the things that you kind of have to see it and live it to appreciate it. We're very isolated, but it is an incredible lifestyle. So in terms of suburbs, it's personally, I don't know of comparisons for it. I would just think that if you're into the beach kind of lifestyle, or if you want to be close to swimming, I would say the Nightcliff and Rapid Creek area would be suitable.
Cool.
But of course, you can't swim in the beach. You can swim at the pool near the beach because of crocodiles.
Yeah, the crocodiles. Yeah, we're famous. I love that. Guru has mentioned this. He's brought up that response sums it up. It's a different country, I think I'll have to go and check it out for myself and see what it's all about.
We are in our own lane, and that's not a bad thing.
Elijah has said
it's a really good place to be. So yeah.
Yeah, Elijah has said Nightcliff is like Merriwa. I mean, I'm not. I mean, would you see that? You're from Perth, so would you? I mean, I'm not sure whether you're south of the SOR or.
No, I'm a north of the river girl.
So yeah, I mean, Merriwa did have that kind of stigma and reputation. So I mean, would you say that Nightcliff has that as well, or?
It has a reputation of more of the relaxed beach, I guess, vibe. There's a lot of nice restaurants along there. There's a lot of, I guess, events. Like, it's kind of for an outgoing sort of person, I would think.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Which I'm not sure that.
I mean, in terms of the northern suburbs as a whole, we would generally see. I mean, that's close to our airport, all of our major, like our biggest shopping centre, both of our hospitals, the uni. So it is really, I guess, good because those people would like to stay close to work, of course. I mean, Darwin traffic is nothing. So if they're in any of these suburbs, they could be at work in like 10 to 15 minutes, which, I mean, who doesn't want a short drive, a short commute?
Wow.
So yeah, we do lease a lot to hospital staff in these areas.
Yeah, because it's close. You got the hospital kind of near. Somebody's chime in if you're around the country. I mean, I haven't been up to Darwin, but I'd imagine that there'd be pockets that would remind me of parts of the Wollongong, Illawarra. Somebody said Nightcliff is like Wellington Point and Manly in Queensland, so that's out to the sort of, I suppose, west. You call the beaches of Brisbane, but smaller, like old Redcliffe. So I remember I was up in Redcliffe probably 15, 20 years ago, and I could it's interesting that they say it's like Redcliffe because back then it was quite nice, but I imagine Redcliffe has changed in the last 10 or 15 years. So it's funny these people have mentioned suburbs that I've actually been to in Queensland or Brisbane as well. But no,
a lot of the homes in this area, unless they've had a renovation or a facelift, they will be slightly older. So you may need to consider, obviously, an upgrade at some stage. They're probably older than the Palmerston region, but that's not always a bad thing because the land sizes, especially in places like Leanya, you will get quite a good size land around the 800 square meters or more sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's quite spread out, and yeah.
Newer heads and newer developments, from my understanding. So the blocks are smaller and newer heads.
Yeah. They are. You can still get some larger blocks in Muirhead, but generally they'd be around the 400-500 square meters, maybe slightly bigger, but they are quite close together. I mean, they are beautiful homes though, and it's a beautiful estate. So it's new, it's fresh, but obviously smaller block sizes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm taking this tour on too much of a detour, but out of interest, Kirsty, where will you see the biggest gap between bottom end and the top end as far as like unrenovated and renovated?
Oh, love that question.
Like a dollar figure, like a difference in rent.
Yeah, or it's like difference in rent, also difference in value. Like, because if you've got an area where you can buy for 500 and it's dirty, but you can sell it for 600, there's not too much there. But if you're buying for 500 and you can sell it for 750, 800, it's like there's a lot of meat in the sandwich. Is there a few areas in Darwin that are maybe a bit more of a standout than others to really have that value discrepancy?
I wouldn't really know in terms of, I guess, resale value and I guess financials, but in terms of if you're looking for something like a renovator or something that you could, I guess, increase your value, you definitely have plenty of opportunity in the northern suburbs. The homes, yes, they need a little bit of love, but generally if you hold on to them and you make the right decisions, I have noticed you can definitely make a good, I guess, profit in that way.
Yeah, that's I love that the renovators come out in Todd Sloan and on our pre-chat a couple of days ago, Kirsty, I asked about you can see that Todd's a renovator and I'm more of a developer, because I asked are people sort of building, can you build granny flats or can you sort of subdivide the blocks? I was like, oh, renovating to me, I got to pick up a paintbrush, and I mean, you don't want to see me cut in, it's horrible, or try and strip up some carpets. So to answer that, I suppose, I'll ask that question again. Like, do you see an opportunity to sort of chop up blocks or subdivide or build granny flats? And what for people out there want to value add and build equity? Do you see much of that in Darwin?
I personally don't see a lot of it. We do have some properties that will do that, and they'll label them A and B of that property. Generally for us, it would be called multi-generational living, where we have a lot of elevated homes, like homes on stilts. So what people will normally do is if they have a home like that, there is a lot of opportunity there for them to build in the bottom. They will build that in, add a bathroom, add a kitchenette, and some people do lease those out separately. They'll sublease them to other people. In terms of separate granny flats, there is some of that, but I wouldn't say it's very popular or done a lot yet. Not yet, but I would say if that is something that you're considering, to definitely make sure that it is separate water, separate electricity, because that will determine, obviously, when you're renting to someone, and if say the power stays in one person's name, it's very hard to differentiate whose usage is what.
Yeah,
got it. And is it sorry, Jeff, you go, mate.
I was going to say the other thing with that sort of upstairs downstairs arrangement, I've seen it a lot in Townsville over sort of last 6 to 12 months, and you just need to be really careful of that it is compliant. That you have the fire if you're going to try and rent it out to separate entities, because that's when you start to run into and it can be costly and expensive to do that sort of modification. So if you're speaking to an agent in Darwin, they're saying, I rent it out to separate people, it's all above board. Really just ask that question, is it fire safety rated? Do you have that thing in place? And if they can't answer it, be a little bit mindful.
Yeah, you would need the correct, obviously, building permit. Make sure it's been structurally sound, it's to code, and then obviously make sure that it's safe. I personally don't deal with a lot of people that rent out homes separately on the same block, and only because in my experience it can be a little messy, especially if they are not separately metered.
And just to clarify as well, Kirsty, because I don't know, I'm losing every now and then, it might be on my end, but so you can actually rent out a granny flat separately in the NT and it's not to a family member, because a lot of the regulations around this in heaps of states have just like somewhat recently changed. Do you know, is that something you still can do in the NT? Because I hear you saying that you don't really do it much, but is it still done legally?
I don't know that agents will specifically do it, and I don't know if it's recently changed, but certainly typically of this, it'll be owner occupiers that are renting the beneath, they're subletting it themselves to, I guess, someone from social media or someone they've found through a friend.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's, I don't think it would have like a lease agreement and those kind of things attached to it. It would be more of a, I've got a room, renting a room. I wouldn't expect they'd actually
Get under the table.
I guess have. Yeah, which obviously is frowned upon. I personally don't engage with those sort of things. But I guess people still do that.
Could you imagine running around collecting the rent if it was all cash in hand? It'd take you ages.
I guess you start counting out the dollar coins.
Some people. Yeah, I've got, I do have, for example, not a lot of, but I have had inquiries where people have bought, say one particular person, he bought a 9-bedroom house and he asked me to rent out room by room, which would have made me a lot of money, but I said no, because I feel very strongly that that concept does not work. It's just too messy, and I personally don't think it's worth the risk, especially with renting room by room. There's no real, I guess, agreement. There's no condition report. It's I don't think it's worth the headache that it comes with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There you go. I like that. Mm-hmm. So somebody commented, so Ricky, I was just giving you around the grounds tour of Darwin for people that haven't been there. I know the Meme King. I'm sorry, but for those not familiar, Ricky does a few meme hits here and there. He's done a couple on Darwin, but we'll finish off in. Let's go down to Palmerston, because I think that can be the talk of the town, and then we'll sort of start. I think what'd be great is to really hear unpacking those sort of 3 to 5 suburbs that are getting a lot of interest, and then I think we throw to viewers' questions. There's been heaps about insurance, and are you familiar with insurance costs as a property manager, or Kirsty, or what are you? While we're here,
in terms of landlord insurance or building,
or just the cost of general building insurance, like is it more expensive like in these more tropical, like your Townsvilles, your Rockhamptons, your Mackays, you really sort of start to see that insurance you can be up with $3,000 to $5,000 even if you're in a non-flood in those. So is it,
I mean, I wouldn't really know, I guess, what other states' insurances cost is like, but to speak from, I guess, my own private experience, my insurance is around the $1,800 for one property, and I think around $2,100 for another. So, I mean, from the sounds of what you're saying, that's on the cheap side, maybe. I don't know.
Pretty standard around. I just did a couple of home insurances around the country, and you're sitting between your sort of $1,700 to sort of $2,500, depending on where it is, and you can sort of really go up as a $3,000 depending on which insurer up in Townsville and around those places. But so you're not your average.
That would be obviously for your building insurance. In terms of landlord insurance, we don't, I guess, have a lot of providers that will provide in Darwin, but I do know the one that I use, this is just landlord insurance. Obviously you need the add-ons, but they're about $365 for Darwin annually. That's
not too bad. That's pretty reasonable.
No, it's pretty decent. It's a pretty good peace of mind. I mean I cannot give financial advice, but I personally will get my insurance, building and contents, and then get my landlord insurance separately rather than bundling them. I personally find it better value.
Bundling. There we go. All right. So I love that sort of detour, and I love to use the term detour as well, Todd. So we've got Palmerston here, which is getting a lot of interest. So what are we sort of seeing around the burbs, and how far is Palmerston? Are we talking sort of 20 Ks? Are we talking 50 Ks from Darwin City, Maine?
So basically, if you're in Palmerston, to get to the CBD is going to take you 20 minutes.
Okay.
So it really doesn't take long. 25 Ks and you'll be there. And then if you're looking to get to the northern suburbs, that'll be about 15 to 20 Ks as well. So it's kind of like 15, 20 minutes drive from, you can get somewhere in that time.
Yeah. And I can see
it's really not that far.
You've got a hospital, you've got a water park, you've got all sorts of, so it's its own sort of self-contained to some extent city. So take us around and we were talking about it yesterday. There's almost a road that divides it somewhere down the middle. Not saying good or bad area, but talk to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Changhua Terrace obviously is smack bang down the middle there. So that kind of divides the two main areas. But in terms of, we do have a water park. So I don't know if you know, but all of our water parks in Darwin are free. So you can visit them as frequently as you like. And it is obviously, we need it for the heat to keep the kids happy, but it is very cool. I'm from Perth and I was shocked when I realized it was free. But we do have our own little, community here. There is a hospital. It is just a public hospital. If you want the private hospital, you need to go to the northern suburbs.
Yep.
So it's a smaller hospital. And then obviously we do have a major shopping centre here as well, which is called Gateway. And that's sort of as you're entering Palmerston, that's at the top of it.
Yep.
Which is kind of, out that way.
Yeah.
Kind of here where it says, shopping centre, shop Palmerston. So that'll be around that area. It is our major shopping centre here. People we get in Palmerston generally, to be honest, is families. The homes are newer. The blocks are still decent sized. In fact, quite of them are quite bigger, especially if you're looking in areas like Johnston. They have really big block sizes, and Bellarmac, which Bellarmac's down the bottom over here. So they will both be quite large blocks. It's all relatively modern. You do get the older suburbs, such as Woodruff and Grey area. They can be, older, and then of course we have the brand new, which is the Coley over here on its own. That is really, really fresher, I would think, than Muirhead. Similar thing, the homes are brand new, they're beautiful, but they are on smaller blocks. Well, majority of them will be on smaller blocks.
I love there's something called one brain cell shared. I don't know what that is. But I just said so. There are some lots being released sort of around that. So, but there's not. I wouldn't say there's hundreds of them, but I can sort of see there is a bit of land. But is that land? You may not know, but are they able to? Is that farmland that they're able to develop, or is that sort of national park? Like, is there?
Is this Johnston?
Yeah, or just sort of.
Or are you talking like this?
To the right of Bakewell, like out sort of towards Howard Springs kind of way.
Oh, yeah. So that's Johnston. So that's a relatively, newish suburb as well. The blocks are really big there. It is built up. They're all homes, and there are a couple of apartment complexes there as well. But it is actually quite a nice suburb, and it rents quite well. That's where my $980 home is actually leased on Lynch Road there. So it even backs onto a major road and still achieved that rent.
Yeah. Nice. Look, we are going to talk to I'll call them the hotspots and the not spots, which is kind of, when we say not spots, I think not spot may sound a bit derogatory, but it's more around just where you need to maybe be a little bit more cautious and just have potentially a higher risk tolerance and have a really great property manager like Kirsty. So they've been asked about where to stay away from and the red flags. So somebody's already said in the comments, stay away from Malden and Grey. And as Kirsty has called out, there are two sides. The Wang Chung Road is the one that sort of splits. And look, it depends on your risk tolerance. If you're comfortable taking an area, it's the buy-in price. Like, what is your budget? What is your what are you looking to achieve? If you want to potentially accept a riskier sort of prospect, then that's if you're a more experienced investor, maybe that could work for you. But it's just kind of how much you can negotiate.
I guess if it's okay with you, I'll share an example.
Yeah, go on.
I've got, so here is like the Driver, Grey, Woodruff, Malden. These would be considered as probably not as desirable in terms of people's outlook. Like someone is saying, stay away from Malden and Grey. I don't agree with it in a sense, because everywhere there is value, and there is good pockets and bad pockets to any suburb that you're going to inquire in. As an example, one of my clients, so he's purchased a property in Woodruff right here, which is right in the middle of those two areas. Now, this is only a couple of months ago, probably 2 months ago. He's purchased it's a townhouse in a complex of probably, I think, four or five. He's purchased there mid 200,000. I think it was 260 from memory. We then spent, I think it was approximately 13 to 15,000 doing a facelift on that one. it was quite aged, a little bit, rough around the edges. So we did a repaint, just some minor things, really. New curtains, just made it a bit beautifuler, I guess you'd call it, replace the old vanity for a nice vanity and a big mirror. After doing that, we've rented it within 2 weeks of that, and we've rented it at $480 per week. So, and he was comfortable with me sharing his return of investment at the minute is 10% on that property.
10%
so
is in,
I wouldn't say
Like, is it his yield?
A growth, or you're talking about the rental?
So no, he said his full ROI is 10%.
Okay, yeah, probably, yeah. That's
So he bought it for $260. Yeah, he bought it for $260. We've put in around, I think at the most it would have been a $15,000 facelift, and then we're renting at $480 per week at the moment. So he was really happy with that result, and that of course is in those suburbs that people are saying to stay away from. So be wary, of course, but if the numbers work, I wouldn't say no to a deal if it has the potential.
Yeah, yep. And what are those, I mean, not that we sort of want to, what are the sort of things that if you sort of start to see, is it sort of shopping trolleys, is the burnouts in the street? Like what are those red flags of people that have asked in any suburb, not just your Malden or your Grey or your...
Yeah, I mean, anywhere, of course, you can obviously see if it's run down. A lot of the time we do have obviously housing commission in Darwin, so some suburbs will be more highly populated than others. And we can have things, for example, on our, if you're looking at a property, there might be a sign on the fence that might say this is a dry area or no drinking allowed. So that would mean that that's likely a housing commission home. And not to say anything bad about it, I have lovely tenants both from housing and that, it's nothing wrong with it, but you can see those areas will be more highly populated than others. So places like Malden, probably in the northern suburbs, you're looking in like the over here at the Kurama or Malak area will probably have, I guess, a higher percentage of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do get the odd shopping trolley here and there, but I mean, it's Darwin, so kind of anything goes.
Just jump on Google Street View and have a bit of a look around. I remember the first time Bianca and I drove through some parts of Logan, we thought it was hard rubbish day. It turns out it was just like, now that's how the front looks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like anything, you just need to do your homework and make sure you're comfortable at that price range and with what you're purchasing. I think there's good and bad to every area.
Oh, gee, interesting question. So
Jeff, where are you seeing the questions, mate? I can't see them again.
Oh, they're on
the comment section.
They're on Facebook, and they're also on YouTube as well. So if you jump in the comments tab on the left hand side, Todd.
That's where I am, but I can only see YouTube comments. I think you're seeing a lot more.
The Facebook ones, they stopped throwing those on because of an unsavory incident. But no, I will unpack. Let's unpack because we talked to a lot of suburbs on around Darwin. I've got a couple as well that people have thrown to me. So after the break, we'll get to that. And then do you have one more Reno example? Or that was the Reno example you had, Kirsty?
Yeah, that's my major one. We do get a lot of it. I've got a lot mid-reno at the minute, so I'll probably have a few more examples in a few weeks.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Maybe even sort of we don't have to mention suburbs or anything like that, but even just where potentially there's which pocket of I suppose Darwin you can potentially pick some of those up where people are finding them. But we'll run to this quick ad, and then we'll get back with the suburbs. So get those comments ready, to everyone. I see them come through as well. Thanks everybody. See you soon.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yields, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia, and not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
And we are back. So I wanted to address the property management fees, because that's a question that people are probably going to be asking if you're looking. So are they? I'm not going to ask, but generally, what are they in Darwin? Should people be expecting to look at? I may not know competitors.
It'd probably be, I would say, a standard will be 10%. Some charge more, some charge slightly less, but we are not, I guess, as cheap as other states. I have had a lot of clients tell me Darwin is expensive in comparison.
Yeah.
And I guess the biggest reason as well for that is we have a lot more turnover. So they will probably have, I mean, I'm guessing other states will have tenants for years. Ours are 6 to 12 months. We're kind of a revolving door. So a lot of effort goes into it. That is a pretty standard, would be 10%.
Yeah, wow.
And how does your reletting fee come into that as well then? Or releasing
That's
fee?
an addition. Yeah, so there are additional charges. So the charges you'll be looking at for property management in Darwin will be generally you get an admin fee. You'll get a letting fee, which will be when the property is first rented, which kind of covers like the open homes, the inspections, the applications, processing the applications. It goes into all of that is covered by the letting fee. So the admin fee, the letting fee, the lease renewal, your regular, I guess, management fee, and then typically you'll also receive an end of financial year statement fee as well.
And so that's
you're
covered
looking
by
at
the
5,
tenant?
I guess, fees. Their landlord charges.
Landlord charge. Okay, so that's like a 2 weeks letting fee, or that is all in the 10%, just so I can understand that right?
No, it's additional. So you'll get your 10%, then you'll get the letting fee additional. So it can be anywhere from 1 week to 2 weeks rent in Darwin.
Yep. Okay, cool. So pretty similar to everywhere else.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yep.
This is interesting, and we'll talk to your sort of where you're seeing a lot of interest in the suburbs as well. But we'll unpack some of the submitted. So if you've got, I've seen Nightcliff a couple of times. So if you've got areas you want us to ask about, please let us know. But I wanted to ask: are you finding the bad is going away and getting better? Gentrification, like what is that sort of? You've been sort of in this, at least in Darwin, for over 12 years. So are you starting to see the areas such as your in Palmerston are gentrifying, or are they sort of, is it just roughly staying the same?
I mean, to be honest, probably similar. I don't think there will have been a lot of change. It's probably, there isn't a lot of change because majority of those homes, like for example, in one suburb, it'll be mostly owner occupied, or it'll be mostly investment, or it'll be mostly housing commission. So those don't change too often.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect a big change.
Yeah. Yep. Another thing that somebody asked about the risks of somebody asked about the
bushfire
fires.
and flooding.
Yeah, I'm like, is that a reading? Yeah, is it more about cyclones up in Darwin? I mean.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a risk. You can have any of those things, especially in our rural area. So Palmerston, close to Palmerston, will be our rural suburbs like Howard Springs, Coolallinga, Humpty Doo. Those areas do have more bushfires, I guess, because of their location, the amount of land that's vacant. so we definitely do get bushfires, and we also like purposely have burn off fires. So that's where they'll burn down the gardens to obviously maintain that area. So that is a risk, yes. But in terms of flooding, not so much. But in saying that, if you don't have a property that has good drainage, that can cause problems, because if you have poor drainage, we get a lot of rain. So that will enter the home if your property is not, made for that. And that's where the elevated homes have a one up on us, because they don't have that, I guess, as bad. But we do get a lot of roof leaks, water coming through doors, water coming through windows. Like, the home has to be structurally sound. So it does happen, but I wouldn't think not frequently. And certainly in terms of cyclones, that's probably on everyone's radar. Everybody wants to have, a cyclone kit ready to go. You want a first aid kit, all those things. But I've been here, for 12, nearly 13 years, and I think I've only experienced one time where a cyclone maybe was a worry, and that didn't turn out to be anything. So, like, it's rare, but it does happen. So you should be prepared.
Probably the biggest one that comes to mind is Cyclone Tracy, which I think was, I feel like it was 1975. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not history. I do love my history, but so let's throw into, people are asking so many questions about pizza as well. But I wanted to know, if we go around, what are your sort of 3 to 5, and as a property manager, and you are an investor as well, so you do have that experience. You've done quite well in some of your investments as well. Just to kind of cover that off, you are a young property manager, also an investor. But I wanted to, what are your sort of 3 to 5 that you're seeing a lot of, and people need to crunch the data on this, and some of the data in Darwin is going to be like, there may not be the volume of it you're going to see in other states. So you need to take that in mind and make your own decisions as to how that impacts you. But what are the 3 to 5 that you're seeing interest around Darwin?
I'm definitely getting a lot of interest in Malden and in Driver. So that has been pretty popular in terms of purchasing. Also, there's quite a few in the northern suburbs, a lot in Malak and Marara. So they're probably a couple that people are looking at. In terms of me personally, I like Leanya. The homes are quite nice, and they're big. They're big blocks, and it's quite central to everything in that area. In Palmerston, and probably because I live in the suburb, but I like Rosebery. It's a really family friendly, lots of parks. It's got a nice, I guess, energy. So for me, I would pick Leanya and Rosebery, but for others, they're sticking to the Malak, Marara, Malden, Driver areas.
So I was expecting Todd to come out with, he's got these questions. He's circulating his head. I was waiting for Todd to come out with those questions. But what is it about those areas in your sort of your Roseberries, Leanyas? What are you sort of seeing? Is it the community feel, the families, or is it you're sort of seeing rental yields, lower vacancy rates? What is there anything that stands out for you in those areas as opposed to the ones where other people may be buying?
Yeah. I think probably you just have to be advantageous, like with the property. So if a property comes up that's a good deal, I would jump on it, because those suburbs are probably safe. They're safe in a way that it's got a good reputation. It's got a good rental return. I can lease them quite quickly. So for me, I feel like they do well in leasing. And so for me, that makes my job easier. And the homes are generally pretty good quality. Like they're decent. So for me, I try to, stick to that. And one of my investment in Rosebery does quite well.
There you go.
I actually had a question here that
I'm probably biased.
No, it's fine. I mean, you're putting it out there. But you go on, Todd, with your question, mate.
I'm just reading all the comments. Now that I've found the comment section, I'll just keep reading them. And I actually saw an interesting one come through from Oliver, which was, what's the typical type of problems that you deal with when it comes to tenants, defaults, notices, vacates? Like, what's the most common kind of issue you're finding that people should be aware of?
As in Darwin related, or just a tenancy in general?
Definitely Darwin.
I suppose more Darwin related. Yeah. Like, is there something that's a bit more common than normal?
I'll bring the question up on the thing
Yes.
and read it in full. How's the appeal of Zuccoli renters and owner profile and demographic spread, and also what are the typical type problems you deal with when it comes to tenant defaults or notice to vacate? So I think he's asking a specific question there about Zuccoli, about what sort of vibe is, and then generally across Darwin, what you sort of see as some of those problems and those things.
Yeah, I actually just kind of ignored the first question and just jumped into the second one to make it easy, but now we've got both.
No, definitely. Zuccoli, people like Zuccoli. It's modern. It's really pretty. You know, they've got water bodies, they've got shopping centres, they've got a lot of parks. Like, it's super family friendly. And the homes, because they're new, people are happier with them, and they're willing to pay, I guess, a little bit higher for them because there's no maintenance. They know that it's good. So Zuccoli is popular. Absolutely. People do like it. If you're, I guess, you know, if you're happier with sometimes the smaller block size, with having a beautiful home, sometimes the block can be sacrificed. In terms of defaults, I mean, of course, there's, like everywhere, rental arrears will probably be one of the big ones. Also for us, gardening, probably, because we have a really tropical environment. So if the garden is, I guess, wild and out of control, it's really hard for a tenant to maintain such a huge amount of garden. In our wet season, the gardens grow like mad, and then in our dry season, the gardens shrivel up, and it's really hard. So finding the right balance and helping the tenant to be educated on how to maintain it and when, that's probably one of the bigger things that I see, especially when they are vacating. Like, if they, for example, they started the lease in the wet season, and then it ends in the dry season, there'll be a discrepancy with the garden. So generally those are things that we need to, I guess, educate and just make sure the expectations are right, that it will be drier, and that is just part of it.
Yeah, it's really like hearing you speak about these things. You are, I believe, based on, I mean, the conversations we've had, a property manager at the top of your game. And these are, I suppose, the kind of things that people need to be asking questions of their property managers, along with the standard, how many properties you manage, like how many sort of, how do you deal with difficult situations, like what's your vacancy rates of your properties. So those are all the questions, but you can see you actually go beyond that, and sort of the communication style you have, sort of lens that you hopefully don't have too many of those challenges. Of course, they are going to pop up, but this is a question from Elijah. It's a cracking one. And I think what he's asking for, he wants to know where is the biggest bang for buck in Darwin. This is where this question is coming from. He's like, but he wants somebody, he wants the best of both worlds. He wants the pizza he wants his favorite pizza cooked perfectly from a nice Italian a pizza that Nonna cooks, I suppose. But he wants to know, where is the most affordable for young local couples in Darwin?
I think it's really hard to answer that, because it's what is he wanting to achieve in terms of lifestyle? Because that's probably one of the bigger things. If you're looking for affordable, I would say go for the older home and do a slow renovation yourself. That's probably going to be the cheaper option. Definitely building is a lot more expensive for us at the moment.
Okay, so something that I was actually curious about is that if Darwin's typically got a bit more of a higher transient population than a lot of other regional towns, what's something that people can really bear in mind when they're looking at planting the seed and buying an asset for the longer term that would be more attractive to locals that actually want to stay there, opposed to that transient community? Like, is there certain pockets or certain property types that people could maybe invest into to try and mitigate that risk of transients?
Yeah, 100%. I think personally that's kind of my tactic normally when I am leasing a property. My preference is, not that my preference is a local, but if there is a local, I will let my owner know that they are local, because they're probably likely to stay longer, and that's less releasing fees, less vacancy. So those would probably be your standard home, your 3-bed or your 4-bed, because families grow, and if they want stability, they'll stay longer. That's in my opinion, of course. But then you do get properties that are perfect for seasonal or, transient people. So it depends on what your goal is. Me personally, I would try to attract a local having a solid home and a well-maintained home, because say they're in there a year or two and repairs aren't getting done, the rent keeps going up but nothing's changing, they're probably going to look elsewhere.
And is there any kind of pockets within Darwin that is a bit more localized and a bit more transient, or is it just like, nah, everywhere's just kind of does its own thing?
I think it's quite spread out. Absolutely. I mean, in the northern suburbs, you probably do get a lot more hospital workers, healthcare providers. But for us, because we're such a small place, no matter where you live, you'll be at work in 20 minutes. I mean, 30 minutes absolute max. You can pretty much get to your place of work. So they don't have to stay in a certain suburb because it's accessible.
Got it.
And I think so. Yeah. To that, Todd. I mean, you can sort of get sort of pretty and get everywhere. So there's not really one area that lends itself to people staying longer. I mean, maybe if you're a hospital worker, you may sort of go there for a placement and then sort of fly out somewhere else, I imagine. But I'm only just trying to use some logic, which that logic.
I think a lot of people will come to Darwin, obviously sometimes for work or for a change, and then they will get stuck because people fall in love with our lifestyle. So we do get a lot of transient people, but we get a lot of people that say, I'm only here for a year, and then 5 years later they're still here. So it's like, it's just typical Darwin. I think it's an attraction place. I feel like once you get here and you live the lifestyle, it's really hard to go back to the lifestyle where you're driving an hour or two to work. Like, it's just, who wants to do that? It's just, So we try to keep them when we can.
Yeah, I agree. It's a sort of place I suppose you have to experience the sound of it. So Gurmeet has asked, and we have covered off this. He spoke about what is the reason for the price stagnation in recent years. I'd say it's more than recent. We can see here, this graph is not necessarily, there's not much pretty in my graph, Todd. I didn't go to art school, unfortunately. This is a ChatGPT, but so we can see here that from 2000, you're starting off at about roughly 150,000. And then from 2000 to 2010, it ran all the way up. So it close to tripled that price in 10 years. Wow. And since that time, it literally went nowhere. And then it sort of ran up a little bit more to 2015, where it hit its peak of 600,000. This is the median house price in Darwin. And then it went all the way back down in 2020, the start of COVID, so literally in 10 years, it went nowhere. You've probably, and of course you've got holding costs, all those good things. And then we saw the COVID spike, which took it up to about just under 600,000 again. So he asked that question, and the answer to that, I suppose, it lies as to how much money was invested in the city, and how much sort of it was led somewhat by the mining by IPEX, and then sort of I suppose a lot of government sort of spending up that way as well, which then just sort of, I mean, along with what happened in the regional sort of mining parts of northern Queensland and your Gladstones, your Murrumbars, and your Port Hedlands and your Karathas, it just sort of, I mean, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but they just stopped and it just probably got unaffordable as well. But you're thinking it absolutely close to tripled in 10 years. And I suppose, is that sort of your synopsis and hypothesis as well, Kirsty?
Yeah, it's we definitely had the peak around 2015, like 2012 to 2015 was really good for sales. It did definitely drop off, and that's when the rentals kind of shined a bit more. We were probably surpassing them in terms of we were making more money, I guess, because they didn't want to sell at that time. No one wanted to sell, so they were all being held. And for us, that was a good time for leasing. Not saying it's changed, but I will say sales are sort of looking like they're doing better than the rentals at the moment, probably because our supply is increasing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that sort of rounds it up. I mean, we've got a couple of. Have you got any burning questions, Todd? I've got a couple of suburbs that I will pop in, but what kind of?
I was actually just about to ask you to expand on that when you're saying the supply is increasing for you guys on the rental side of things. Like, is there any kind of a rough percentage on that you're seeing?
Actually, got some charts in.
Not in terms of percentage, but a lot, I guess, of investors or even locals buying property at the moment. So when they are buying the properties, obviously they're all sort of settling, within the same time period, and then we wait for 30 days and we've got a busy period again. Like, it's because we're getting more people buying, that means our supply is increasing for rentals because they obviously need to fill their vacancy. When that happens, we're now fighting for tenants versus having our selection. When the people weren't selling because it wasn't, I guess, it wasn't worth it for them at that stage, we had a lower supply in the rental department and we could make our choice of tenant. So it has shifted slightly where we're now, I guess, I wouldn't say competing, I mean, sort of competing. We don't have, I guess, as smooth of a journey into securing a tenancy as what we did.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think with rents have increased as much as they have as well, similar to you're probably seeing in Adelaide as well, Todd, and even in pockets of Perth as well. You're starting to see there's that bit of would you say there's a rental ceiling sort of appealing, like rents can only go so high, but people say, I will actually buy a property. Is that what you're sort of starting to see?
Yeah, rents were becoming slightly unaffordable, and a lot of people, like a lot of tenants. I did have a lot of tenants actually combine households to, I guess, make it worth it for them because they were paying quite a higher amount of rent. So they would, move in, or their parents would move in with them, or if it were, two mums, they'd move in together to share the cost because rent was becoming a little bit on the high side. And not everybody could keep up with it because, of course, rates were increasing. Landlords had to on-charge what they were suffering, which then made the tenants, I guess, suffer as well. Like it's a bit of like a roll-on effect. So because rents sort of reached their height, now people are considering other options. I mean, obviously, though, they have to have that affordability, which is the kind of the main problem, is saving for that first home to get you started.
Yeah. That's it's super interesting, I think, and I think it'll start to potentially become, particularly if wages aren't on the sort of increase as well. I think that may become an issue for some capital cities, and we'll see how interest rates go next year. But I mean, I suppose you're renting, that may not impact things as much, but I suppose that's why they're keeping interest rates high, to make sure that rent doesn't necessarily increase as much. But then renters may try and increase that rent, but it's market dictated. Like if it's not affordable for your tenant, and so what I wanted to know, there was one that just a suburb that keeps getting mentioned is Driver. So what are your thoughts? You said it's one of your where people are buying, or?
Yeah, there is some traction in Driver at the moment. Like it's definitely busy. Driver has a very good, or what people say is a very good public school there. They have like a little farm, and like attached to their school, the children can, I guess, farm things, and then they cook them in their little kitchen. Like it's got a good reputation for that.
Cool.
Also, the properties are quite affordable. Yeah, it attracts people because we're zoned with our schools. I guess like most places, you have to be there to be able to go there. Another, I guess, while we're on schools, another really popular school will be Bakewell.
Yeah.
That has a really good academic report. So a lot of people like to be in Bakewell to send their kids to that school. It's a massive school, but popular for that reason. So yeah, I wouldn't say Driver is just the school. It's probably because the homes are quite affordable at the moment, and they're not too old. They're quite achievable.
Yeah, Todd just sent. I think that's an interesting. It sounds like there is a lot happening in Driver. There's a lot of things driving it. That's a terrible sort of thing.
Yeah, that
Todd,
was good. Own it. That was a good pun.
Yeah. I mean, on the spot, not too bad, mate. I'll have to. This is far too small, so I'll see if I can make it a bit bigger. But let's zoom in there if we can. I don't know what were you sending to us here, Todd? What are we seeing?
I was just sending that to you on the group chat, man, just before, because what you were just saying about the affordability aspect of things and rents going up and up and up. But I mean, realistically, the way that Kirsty's describing this, you're leasing some pretty high dollar value weekly rents. And looking at this chart, this is one of the only charts that I've seen here. Darwin, or the Northern Territory more specifically, is the only place in the country where wage growth is actually outpacing the property price growth. So to me, you never want to make a decision on one data point in isolation anyway, but that's a pretty strong indicator that the affordability ceiling that you're just talking about there, maybe it's not reached, maybe we're not even close to it.
Yeah, it's just this is about
Yeah.
dwelling price, but then maybe rents. So rents is sort of, because I don't know if you subscribe to this thing, Todd, but for me, and I'll stop sharing that. But for me, if you sort of start to see rents, and we're seeing that sort of a lot in Melbourne as well, like rents, and Melbourne's a huge capital city, but you start to see rents rising, and that's, I think we saw 15% in Darwin in the last. So you're sort of starting to see those rents rise, but prices still aren't rising. So is that, are we putting the horse before the cart? As rents rise, do people just say, well, I'm going to go and buy a property now? The counterbalancing point to that, and you've mentioned a bit, is yes, it is a Kirsty, you've mentioned it's a somewhat transient town. So, and then you kind of have to weigh up those two things. Are people going to bite the bullet and buy a property rather than just continue to pay a rent regardless of how long they stay? The other thing that I found super interesting is just and people should be looking at these, and not one data point. You sort of put together the picture and then speak to people like Kirsty. It's, well, what are the housing commitments, particularly for new housing commitments, particularly for owner occupiers, rather than investors, because that also, there's a bit of a clue. I'll bring the, if I did have the graph here, but what I was seeing was you sort of started to see in Perth, in particular, in Brisbane, at the start of 2019, you started to see that uptick significantly. So owner occupiers are starting to buy, and no coincidentally, we sort of started to see prices rise in Brisbane and Perth. And you saw the significant dip off in Victoria as well at around the time around 2022, and Hobart, the same sort of thing. So I'm not saying that's the only correlation, doesn't equal causation, but it's just interesting that, and we're sort of starting to see a little bit more interest in Darwin. Like, Darwin is a smaller market from a financing perspective, but to your point, anyway.
I think people go on a buying frenzy, to be honest, when there's a lot of things in the media or a lot of buzz around town, like, oh, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. People start to fret, like, now's the time, I need to buy it now. And that may well be the case, but I have noticed in my conversations, a lot of locals considering purchasing another property because of the buzz that they're hearing. So it's definitely across the board. Everyone's quite keen on what is going to happen in Darwin.
Yeah, I think on that note, I think that's sort of some. Do you have any further questions, Todd? I'm just mindful of everyone's time here. We're sort of
I'm actually just trying to jump back into the questions to see what everyone else is asking at the moment as well. But
be careful.
All of my big ones. All of my big ones were answered. It's more so around the other pockets that can maybe help protect people from more of a transient sort of population. By the sounds of things, you're saying it's not really pocketed so much, but it's more about the type of dwelling that you're investing in. If you're getting something that is more like a 4-bed, 2-bath, and that's going to be more attractive to a local that really wants to plant the seed and live there longer term.
Yeah. And 100%. And generally your property manager will tell you, you've got XYZ applications, and you'll get a full rundown of all of those. So you can then make the decision on which tenancy you're wanting. If you're wanting a local, then obviously you would select someone who you think is longer term or a local. Whereas if you want it a shorter term, or you have different plans for the property, like a renovation, or you need to align it to a certain month that you want it vacant in, you would then probably try the more transient person or someone that might not be as long term. So I think it's just what suits you, the type of home you're purchasing, and then the type of tenancy that you approve.
Yeah. You may not. This may be more of a data platform question, but are you sort of seeing, and this may be showing up in how long properties are taking to rent, but do you have a sort of a feel or even data as to what the percentage of renters in most suburbs would be?
I don't think I do have it like a percentage in each suburb. No, but that's definitely interesting. I'll see if I can find that.
Yeah, we sort of, because you can always jump into and answer these questions as well. We sort of, I was sort of seeing in some of the Palmerston, you're looking at about 40%, which starts to get a little bit higher for what I mean. If you're using that data point as a sole decision, then maybe that might rule that suburb out. I would typically never just rule something out based on the basis of one thing. You want to then sort of look at what the trend is, because that might have been 50%, 55% a couple of years ago, and now it's coming down. So I think it's rather than looking at what it is at the point in time, it's like what it's done and what it may be doing. Yeah. On this note,
I have our vacancy rates.
You wanna
No, I was
bring
going to say, like, our vacancy rates, like for Darwin, are 3%, and for our northern suburbs are 3.7%. So, and then our rural jumps to 5%. So,
Yeah.
I guess it would seem that there's more vacancy in the northern suburbs.
Yeah, and that's kind of a fairly balanced. I mean, 3% people like around the nation, where if anything gets above 1.5%, people start sort of throwing their throwing their something at the TV screen. They're like, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, you're above 1.5%, but I mean, let's pre-COVID, 3% was the sort of where you start to say that's where I'm getting a little bit concerned. It's more of a balanced rental market. If I was start to say at 5%, that'd be you sort of may struggle to start finding tenants. Look, we're doing something a little bit newer here. So if you've gotten value, and if somebody you know may not watch this session, you want to know what's going on in Darwin, we've covered so many topics around what suburbs and what's going on in each suburb, what the economy's doing, what the rental's doing, what the legislation. So much. So if you've loved this session, I'd love for you to jump on and leave us a 5-star review if you haven't already. Drop the likes, the comments, the subscribes, all that good stuff on your favorite platform, people. But
where do I do that, Jeff? I'll give us a 5 stars.
Oh, you haven't already, Todd? This is a bit awkward.
I don't know where I do it, mate.
That's all right. Yeah, no, I will drop that in the thing. But Todd, I want to leave also the question for you to ask Kirsty. It'd be a shame if we didn't ask this question. So if you could ask this one, take it away, Todd.
Oh, who's this one from?
This is from, I believe it's from a friend. It might be from Ricky.
From Ricky. Oh, Ricky. Hey, Ricky. On behalf of Toddy, what is the best pizza joint in Darwin?
Oh, that's tough. So I do like a place called Fanny Bay Super Pizza.
I think somebody mentioned that. I think somebody also.
Fanny Bay Super Pizza. What a name.
Yep. And then there is one in Palmerston. So that's in the northern suburbs. The one I like in Palmerston is called Doughboys. And they're in Suburb. So they're pretty good as well. Yeah.
You getting anything specific there, or is it just like anything on the menu's a winner?
Pretty much anything, if I'm honest. Fanny Bay Super Pizza has pasta too, so I get a bit of both generally. If you go to Doughboys, I think it's called a meat beater. I don't know, but they're really, really huge pizzas. Yeah, we've got some interesting names in Darwin. Like we are in our own world. I don't know if you've heard the Fanny Bay joke as well with the Dickwad Drive. No. So we've got a lot of questionable things.
My dad used to be a traveling sales rep.
Dickwad Drive goes into
and he told me that when you'd call on a customer in Darwin back in the day, they wouldn't let you in unless you walked in with a 6-pack of beer. This is back in the 70s, but I'm assuming it's a bit different now.
We are in our own world, but that is a good thing. It's a really unique place to be, and that's why people fall in love with it. There are definitely some questionable news articles and headlines that you'll probably see. They often get published, but it's different, but it's a good different.
Yeah, no, I've seen. I'm like,
no one really gets offended.
I've had a friend who spent 6 months up in Darwin doing some help with some refugees up that way, and he said that like just the news, the news headlines were absolutely wild. Just like, wow, did nothing happen in the news that day that I can't remember some of them, but just the conversation I've had with him about that time of his life, I was like, wow, man, like that sounds kind of fun. People have gosh, I miss Mindy Markets and Pecan Regatta. There you go.
Yeah. So we have Mindle markets, and that's like Thursdays and Sundays, I believe. Really cool. A lot of people actually will come to Darwin just to be a seller at that market. And then I've had many tenants that have stalls there, and they make a lot of money during that dry season period with those beach markets. It seems people absolutely love going there. So it's definitely a popular one. Yeah.
Excellent.
You can't beat Darwin. I just think everyone has to see it.
The plaudits are coming in, so thanks for coming on, Kirsty. And if people want more, as Joe asked, if people want more Kirsty in their life, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Generally, probably my social media. So I'm a lot on Instagram and Facebook mostly, but of course email and phone is fine as well. But Yeah,
And
I'm around.
yeah, and I think your website, you probably go to your socials on your website, do you?
Yeah. Probably I'm most active on Instagram, probably just, my age and my gender. But yeah, that's probably my main focus.
And
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
want to appreciate Todd for taking time out. You do have a recent addition. So Todd, if people want to check you out, where can they? The best spot is probably the Pizza and Property YouTube, or where should people go to check you out, Todd?
Mate, ironically, I've never listened to an Oz Property Facebook Live on Spotify. I've only ever listened to it on Facebook, right? And I'm trying to rate the show right now, and it says, "Sorry, you need to be a listener of the show to rate the show." So
Todd!
I'm quickly now listening to episodes on Spotify so I can give you a 5-star, mate. But
Yeah.
but yes, you can find us on Facebook. No, where does the show? No, you don't find us on Facebook. That's you guys. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes. And yes, I do have a recent addition. The most beautiful little boy in the world has now been joined to our family. Little Alfred. I'm going to get home to him in a second and give him a little cuddle.
Oh, beautiful.
How good is it? I love that name, Alfred, as well. It reminds me of very, very Vikings sort of. I don't know if people watch Vikings, but yeah, one of the kings.
I love Vikings. Yes.
Yeah, the kings of England. So, all right, everybody. So I've absolutely loved this session. Thanks for coming, Kirsty. Thanks for co-hosting Todd in the absence of Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Send them to Joe. Don't send them my way. But no, as Joe says, let's go and buy a property potentially in Darwin. Everybody, catch you next time.
See you guys.
See you later.